hatta, until. Hatta, this is connected with the previous statement, that وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا, that these messengers were sent to the people, and they conveyed the message, they continued to convey, they continued to bear hardships, until إِذَا اسْتَيْأَسَ الرُّسُلُ, until the messengers were despaired. Istay'asa, from the root letters, ya, hamza, sin, yes. And what does yes mean? To give up hope. And istay'asa is to gradually lose hope. What does it mean? To gradually lose hope. So until the messengers gradually lost hope. Lost hope in what? In people? Yes, in the people accepting Iman. Like for example, Nuh alayhi salam, even he had almost given up, that now no one's going to believe. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirmed that, telling him that now no one is going to believe from your people. So hatta idha stay'asa ar-rusul, this despairing does not mean they despaired of help from Allah. Not at all. Messengers do not give up hope of help from Allah. This is what? They gave up hope of people believing in them. That there was no hope of islah in those people. وَظَنُّوا, and they thought, أَنَّهُمْ, that indeed they, قَدْ, in fact, كُذِبُوا, they were lied to, or they were denied. This part of the ayah has been understood in two ways. First of all, كُذِبُوا, they were lied to. They refers to the people, the communities to whom the messengers were sent. The messengers, they lost hope of people believing. And the people, وَظَنُّوا, and they were certain, أَنَّهُمْ, that indeed they, the people were certain, that they had been lied to. The people were certain that they had been lied to. By who? By their messengers. Or that their messengers had been lied to concerning the victory which they had been promised. Because when the situation, it became very, very difficult for the messenger, what did the people think? That see, this man is a liar. If he was truthful, then Allah would have helped him. And this was very relevant to the situation in which the Prophet ﷺ was in at the time. It was getting so difficult for him because he had just lost Abu Talib. He had lost his wife as well. They had just come out of the boycott that they had suffered for so many years. And then when the Prophet ﷺ went to At-Taif, he was rejected from there as well. Each and every day, the difficulty, the opposition, it was increasing. It was getting more and more intense. And the people, what did they think? See, this man is a liar. So when the people began thinking like this about the messenger, جَاءَهُمْ نَصْرُنَا, our help came to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped His messengers. Secondly, it has been understood that وَظَنُّوا أَنَّهُمْ قَدْ كُذِبُوا. كُذِبُوا has been read as كُذِّبُوا. كُذِّبُوا. And what does كُذِّبُوا mean? From takdeeb. Takdeeb, to deny, to reject. Right? So the messengers were certain that they had been denied by the people. And there was absolutely no possibility of anyone accepting Iman now. So when the messengers were sure that no one is going to believe now, what happened? جَاءَهُمْ نَصْرُنَا, our help came to them. And remember, we learned earlier that whenever the situation becomes extremely difficult, then what happens? Relief is very near. There's a principle that al-amru idha daqa ittasa'. That when a situation, when an affair, it becomes daqa, it becomes tight and constricted, more and more difficult, then what happens? Ittasa'. Then it becomes vast. Then everything becomes easy. But you have to go through that difficulty. You know, like it is said, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Right? So, when they were certain that nobody is going to believe now, and that they had been rejected, جَاءَهُمْ نَصْرُنَا, our help came to them, فَنُجِّيَ مَن نَشَاء, then we saved whomsoever we willed. Meaning those people who deserve to be saved, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them. وَلَا يُرَدُّ بَأْسُنَا, and our punishment is not returned. عَنِ الْقَوْمِ الْمُجْرِمِينَ, from those people who are criminals. Meaning they are definitely punished. لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ. Certainly there is in their stories. In whose stories? In the stories of the messengers. The messengers whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent. The messengers and their people. Certainly in their stories is ibrah, a lesson. A lesson for who? لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, for those people who have intellect. For the possessors of intellect. For those people, there is a great lesson in these stories of the messengers. And look at the word qasas. Again, the word qasas has been used. Not hadith, not hikayah, not some other word. Why? Because the word qasas itself shows, because qassa means to follow someone. Right? So it shows to us that the stories that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has related, they are not for the purpose of amusement. They're not for the purpose of entertainment. Or just to improve your knowledge of history. No. The objective is that you take a lesson, you follow in the footsteps of the one who is being spoken about in the story. So over here we learned about the story of Yusuf a.s. The purpose of studying this story is not so that we increase in our information, so that we can tell another story. No. The purpose is that we follow in the footsteps of who? Yusuf a.s. We take lessons. So لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. And notice the word عِبْرَةٌ has been used. A lesson. And remember, tankir, nakira, is for different reasons. Sometimes it is for tafkhim, which is to show the enormity, the importance of something. So عِبْرَةٌ, a big lesson. A very important lesson. And what is that very important lesson that can be learned from the stories of the messengers? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help comes. Al-amru idha daqa ittasa'. When things become very difficult, then relief is near. And we see this in the story of every single messenger. Every single messenger. Nuh a.s., he preached for over 900 years. 950. And towards the end, the situation had become extremely difficult. But when it became extremely difficult, then relief came. Shu'aib a.s., Salih a.s., when they hamstrung the she-camel, then the punishment came. Right? So when the difficulty becomes very intense, relief is very near. And this is the big lesson in the stories of all these messengers. And especially we learn this from the story of Yusuf a.s. That when he was sent to prison. Now imagine, a prison in a foreign land. Nobody knows you. Nobody cares about you. Nobody can find out you're there. Nobody's going to fight for you. Nobody's going to go try to get you out of the prison. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought him out. Similarly, his father Yaqub a.s., when he was in so much difficulty, he lost another son. What did he know? That the help of Allah is near. So this is the big lesson in these stories. مَا كَانَ حَدِيثًا. This is not a speech. Meaning this Qur'an is not a speech that is yuftara, that is fabricated. This Qur'an is not a hadith that is fabricated, that is invented by a person and ascribed to Allah. No. وَلَكِنْ but it is tasdeeq, it is confirmation. It confirms the truthfulness of what? الَّذِي بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ, of that which is before it. The Qur'an confirms the truthfulness of what? Of the scriptures that were before it. Like for example, the Qur'an confirms the truthfulness of the Torah. And in the Torah you do find the story of Yusuf a.s. So the Qur'an is tasdeeq. وَتَفْصِيل, and it is also a detail, an explanation of what? كُلَّ شَيْءٍ, of everything. Does it mean that in the Qur'an is the explanation for every single thing that exists? What does it mean by كُلَّ شَيْء? A detail for everything. Everything that is relevant. That is relevant to the guidance of human beings. Everything that is needed for the right guidance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has explained that in the kitab. وَهُدًى, and it is also a guide. وَرَحْمَةً, and a mercy. Hudan, it is a guide. It tells you what you should do. It shows you the way. And rahmah, it is a mercy, a relief. That finally people know what to do, how to get out of problems, how to deal with difficult situations. Isn't that a mercy from Allah? When you read Surah Yusuf, it broadens your mind. It makes you more positive. It makes you more hopeful. That's a huge mercy of Allah. Because a person could be going through such difficult problems, but if he's negative, if he does not know why, if he does not understand, it makes experience more difficult for him. So this Qur'an is a rahmah. It is a mercy. لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ, for people who believe. The Qur'an is guidance at the beginning. It tells you what to do. It is huda. It shows you the way. Like we learned earlier, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. But when a person follows those instructions, when a person observes them, then what happens? He ends up getting the mercy of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us what to do. And when we do it, then there is ease in our lives. Then there is comfort in our lives. Then there is contentment in our lives. Then there is satisfaction. And if a person does not follow the instructions that Allah has given, then no matter how much knowledge he has about the Qur'an, he will not feel the rahmah of Allah. He will not have anything of that sort. When a person follows the instruction, then he gets rahmah. So in this ayah we learn that in the stories of the previous messengers, there is a big lesson. And the big lesson we understood. We have discussed about it, that it is that when the difficulty increases, then relief is very soon. But along with that, there are many other lessons as well. Many, many lessons. Which we have discussed as we have studied the story of Yusuf a.s. But there are many other lessons as well. And to summarize the entire story, the main lesson of the story of Yusuf a.s. is that everything in life has its opposite. Nothing at all is permanent. If a person experiences one thing today, he will experience its exact opposite tomorrow. And this is what we see in the story of Yusuf a.s. Where he experienced extreme love from his father, he also experienced extreme jealousy and hatred from who? His brothers. Where he was so loved, so valuable in the sight of his father, he was so meager, so small, nothing in his value in the sight of the people who sold him. وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ. But in the sight of his father, Yusuf a.s. was so valuable. Similarly, where a person is humiliated, where a person suffers from humiliation, then there is a time where he also is given honor. Like for example, Yusuf a.s. was thrown into the well. Why? So that he is humiliated. The woman, she sent him to the prison, so that he is of the Saghirin. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him so honorable, he became Al-Aziz. That the people called him Aziz. Nothing at all in this life is permanent. Where you experience one thing today, you will experience the exact opposite of it tomorrow. Where the entire family was united at the beginning, then in the middle what happened? The entire family was separated. Yusuf a.s. is at one place, the father is in one place, and the brothers are going back and forth again and again, from Canaan to Egypt again and again, until eventually the family is united again. Similarly, where a person has committed a major mistake, the brothers of Yusuf a.s., on the exact opposite, what did they do? They admitted. They apologized. Similarly, the woman, she committed a severe crime as well, but what did she do? She apologized. Nothing at all in this life is permanent. Everything changes. So when you're going through something, when you're experiencing one state today, never think that that is going to be a permanent state. That you're going to remain in that state forever. And when a person thinks like this, then accepting situations becomes very easy. Like for example, when Yusuf a.s. went to the prison, if he thought, okay, this is the end of my life, forget about it. would he be a muhsin? No, he wouldn't be a muhsin. When a person realizes that this is only temporary, this is only a phase, this is only a temporary stage, then what happens? It becomes easier for him to have sabr, to have taqwa. But when a person does not have hope of relief, then what happens? He gives up. He does not have any patience. He does not fear Allah. He does not want to do anything to please Him. He has completely despaired. But the problem with us is that many times we don't like change. Isn't it? We resist change. But the fact is that the only thing that is permanent in life is change. If there's a girl who is unmarried, tomorrow she'll be married. If a girl is in her house with her parents, tomorrow she'll be out of that house. Isn't it so? If someone does not have a car today, he'll have it tomorrow. If a person does not have children today, they'll have children tomorrow. Nothing at all is permanent. Everything undergoes changes. Every state changes. Every phase changes. And this is a reality that we must accept. We must understand. Because only when we accept this, then going through life becomes easy. Then staying positive becomes easy. Looking at the positive side becomes easier. And this is the lesson that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us in this story. If you see, there's so many contradictions, so many opposites throughout. Where there's jealousy, there's love. Right? Where there's arrogance, there's humility. Throughout, there's so many contradictions. We'll listen to the recitation of these ayat and then we'll do a little bit discussion. If you think about it, accepting change is the most difficult thing to do in life. Because it goes against your nafs. You finally get used to something, you finally get comfortable with something, and what happens? You see something completely different coming. And it's very difficult to accept it. It's very difficult to deal with it. Because many times we're not ready to face it. But what's the lesson that we learn from this surah? That إِنَّهُ مَن يَتَّقِي وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. That when a major change happens in your life, when you lose someone you love, when you don't live in the place that you love, when the circumstances in your life, they completely change, if a person has sabr and taqwa, then Allah will not waste His reward. Because in every situation we are being examined. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes our state, from one state to another, one phase of life to the other, what is being observed? That how do we behave? Do we accept? Do we do sabr? Do we think positive? And a person who does sabr, a person who has taqwa, he is doing ihsan, and Allah will definitely reward him. Allah will reward him. And we see that everything we face in life, everything that we go through, it changes. Like for example, one day you're best friends with someone. And the other day you're wondering, why did I befriend them? Right? One day you experience a lot of happiness from one person. And the same person, he hurts you a lot the second day. Now when they love you, when they bring you happiness, you're like, okay, finally I have a very good friend. And the next day when they hurt you slightly, what happens? We go down in the dumps. We get very, very depressed. But the fact is that everything will change. And if you're open to change, then accepting the different situations in life will be easier. Doing sabr will be easier. Having taqwa will be easier. And if a person is not willing to accept any change, then there is no room for him in this universe. Because everything undergoes change in this universe. Every single thing. No house stays forever. No tree stays forever. Nothing stays as it is from the beginning to the end. No, everything changes. And a person does not accept it, he is only causing harm to himself. If you look at it, Yaqub alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam, both of them, they had a very strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A very deep connection. Which is why we see that both of them are turning to Allah repeatedly, again and again. And when a person has this, then he can accept the different situations, and he can do sabr, he can have taqwa, and he can pass the test easily. And when a person does not have this ability, then he cannot pass any test. And the fact is that eventually everything will be over. But what will stay? What you did, how you behaved. That is going to be recorded forever. Anything you go through in life, tell yourself, this is only a phase. This is only a phase. It'll be over. If you're hungry, eventually you'll eat something. If you're tired, eventually you'll sleep. If a baby is crying, eventually he'll be quiet. Everything is a phase, so don't panic. Share your reflections, please.
Everything is a phase, but at the same time, we shouldn't try to take matters into our own hands and do it the wrong way. As we look at, like, the brothers of Yusuf tried to solve their problems by putting him in the well, and the wife tried to solve her problems as well by, like, enticing him and seducing him. And we see that Yusuf alayhi salam, he took everything with patience and he waited for Allah to solve his problem.
Yes, this is what taqwa is, right? It's not just sabr, but taqwa is also needed. Because if a person is going through a difficult situation, what does he think? That, let me just deal with it myself. And he forgets about what Allah has said. Now the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, they did not like Yusuf alayhi salam. Instead of waiting for that phase to be over, instead of changing themselves, instead of improving themselves, instead of thinking, what can we learn from this situation, what did they do? They took things in their own hands. And they did something that was against taqwa.
Also this taqwa remains when we know that وَلَدَارُ الْآخِرَةِ خَيْرٌ لِلَّذِينَ.
Exactly. And then a person is encouraged to fear Allah more when he remembers that the home of the hereafter is much better. In this dunya, if I do get something with my impatience, with disobeying Allah, then how long will I enjoy it? Only for a few days? It'll be over eventually.
I was just focusing at قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ. Like, usually what happens when we call anybody towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and somebody rejects us, we get personal and we just leave the work. Mm-hmm. So, this is what I was relating to how maybe your way is one way. And if the other person is rejecting you, it means you need to change your style, you need to change your strategy. So this is how I just took a lesson that you don't have to adopt only one way. Yes, the place where you're calling upon, that is one, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we need to keep the room in our place as well for the changes, that maybe somebody you call and that person accepted right away, other person right away, third person right away. But once it happens that there is a person that rejects you. So here comes the work where we need to work hard upon it and keep accepting the changes, that they would keep the room for this. Mm-hmm. This is for something to improve your work as well.
Assalamu alaikum. I was just thinking about the brothers when they did so injustice to Yusuf al-Islam, but in the end he forgave them. And how people do, hurt us and everything. And we say, okay, we forgive you and everything, but we don't really forget it. Like, if we don't say to them, we don't remind them, but we go tell the world.
Yes.
And yet we say we forgive them. But that's not really
This is not forgiveness.
I was just thinking of the selfless attitude that the da'i needs to have. Because even like throughout his life, Yusuf alayhi salam, he doesn't complain about his own hardships that he's going through every time, wherever he is, whether he's in jail or even, I was thinking about, subhanAllah, at the time where the woman is trying to entice him and he's like, remembering, may Allah protect me. So even at that time, it's like he's sort of still doing da'wah to her, like go on the straight path, fear Allah, think of Allah. So it's like every point where he is, when he's in jail, when the man forgets about him, like to forget about mentioning him, he doesn't go and, tell him, why did you forget about me? He still reminds him about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah told me all this, and this is how I'm telling you. And even at the end of the story where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now telling the Prophet ﷺ that you're not asking for a reward from them, so why aren't they accepting? So it's like showing continuously, making sure for every da'i, it's like, make sure that is your intention, make sure you're being like that, you're selfless in your actions.
Because if you expect anything from people, then there's something wrong with the intention.
The main lesson of the whole Surah Yusuf was that change is constant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the Quran is tasdiq and it's rahmah to you. No matter what change you're going through, the Quran is able to solve all your problems. And that's just amazing because it has a solution for everything. So don't you take a lesson from that.
Exactly. The Quran is constantly huda. It guides you, tells you what to do, and it's rahmah. Once you follow, then you're at peace. So we need to reflect on the story and think about what lesson have I taken from myself? And what's the change that I'm going to bring about in my life, in my behavior, in my thinking? Because if after learning the entire story, still a person does not change, then what's the point? If it was just intellectual exercise, eventually you'll forget about what you learned. But if you take a lesson and you implement, that will bring about a change in your life. And if you look at it, this ayah that we learned, that there's so many signs in the heavens and the earth, but they are mu'ridun, they constantly turn away. They don't take a lesson from it. So everything that happens, there's something that you can learn from it.
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to say that generally when you hear about patience, you hear about the reward of patience or the fact that one should be patient. But this surah actually teaches us how to be patient, how you can exercise patience. Just by knowing that whatever calamity, whatever difficulty has come, it is from Allah. This is the plan of Allah for you. And He will raise you through it. And also knowing that it is just a passing phase. It's going to pass.
Assalamu alaikum. Just a reflection on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comforting the Prophet ﷺ when he's doing da'wah and nobody's listening to him. This gives us a reminder that when we're doing da'wah ourselves, don't be disheartened, when people are not listening right away. Put in mind that I am not here to convert anyone, because the hidayah is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests people is to elevate their ranks, to increase them in their darajat. So when a person is being tested, he shouldn't think that, maybe I've committed some crime, maybe I'm very sinful. Yes, a person should definitely increase in his istighfar, should do tawbah, but at the same time, you should remember that this is a means of cleansing me, of purifying me. Allah has a plan. And this will make it easier for a person to go through the challenge.
For me, this story is ahsan al-qasas in a way because I learned from things that are practical. And in this story, every single incident that's happening, it's a practical example of what you would do in that case.
Assalamu alaikum. I was just reflecting in the entire surah, Yusuf alayhi salam, he had taqwa of Allah, even in the most intimate situations, like when he was in the room with Aziz's wife, and it was only him and her, he still feared Allah, and he had no idea that his story was going to be narrated in the Quran, and so many people are going to read it. So we should think about it like on the Day of Judgment, when all our sins will be displayed in front of everybody that was ever created. Is our story going to be like the best of stories, or is it going to be the worst?
Because everything that happens in life, it's a story, it's an incident. Is it really worth mentioning? The story of our life. Okay. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.